Welcome to Talk to Me Africa, ladies. It's such a pleasure to see all of you looking so beautiful just to be on the show today. Thank you so much for taking the time. Thank you.
Pleasure.
I must say that Dorothy and Gladys are returning guests on the show. I'm so glad that you found it, good enough to come back. I really appreciate you. That's how we grow. But my little sister here, friend, Shirley, it's her first time on the show. So let's give her the honors to introduce herself first. Welcome, Shirley, to Talk to Me Africa.
Hello, everybody. My name is Shirley Ngwesa. I actually reside in Minnesota. So I am currently a social worker for Washington County. I have 3 beautiful boys, and I am currently back in school for my master's in Health and Human Service Administration.
Look at that. Congratulations.
Thank you so much. It's a lot of hard work with 3 kids and a single mom, but I am managing on some level of sanity. I am getting through it. So I am happy to be here. It's an honor, it's a pleasure, and I'm looking so forward to this conversation today.
Awesome. Dorothy, my sidekick from back in the day when we worked at the radio together in Limbe in Cameroon. Welcome back to the show.
Oh, May, it's always a pleasure to be here. It's always a pleasure to share with formidable guests like Shirley and Gladys, to share our experiences with women and men out there, and to educate people in general. So I'm Dorothy. I'm based in Germany. I am a communications expert. I work for a software company in Germany, and I am really delighted to be here once again. Thank you.
Thank you. It's interesting you mentioned men. I found it so hard to bring men on the show. I talked to one man who's been divorced twice, but he didn't want to come on the show. So people might think this is a woman's thing. It's not. But being that I'm still a small show, it's hard for me to be the single producer and get people who can come on the show. But hopefully I'll get men later on sometime. Gladys Berry, welcome back to Talk to Me Africa.
Thank you for having me, Mabel. Hello, Dorothy. Hello, Shirley. Thank you for joining us today. It is my pleasure to come back on the show. My name is Gladys Berry. I am the host of the Healthy Lovers Hour.
On Bossa World Radio, yes.
Divorced mom. And rocking it. I have practiced in occupational therapy for almost 10 years now, and I also went back to school in marriage and family therapy. I look forward to finishing with that soon. Mm-hmm. And so I come to share not just my lived experiences, but a clinical background of what marriage and divorce, how it could reshape our lives for better.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think the goal that I would like to have, from this show today is to let the world know that it's okay to have a divorce. It's okay to have those children who are raised, from divorced homes. It's not a shame to be divorced. So before we get into the nitty-gritties of the show today, in your own words, ladies, what do you think marriage is? In your own words, no Bible here, no legality. What is it to you, Shirley?
For me, marriage to me is when 2 people unite to form a uniformed whole. I believe I want to throw that stigmatism out the window of women are supposed to do more than men. Mm-hmm. For me, it comes to the table as we're in a partnership, 50-50. Equal relationship where we're both helping each other to grow as one. Because when you come into a marriage, you don't know, you're different people forming a unity, a bond that you're learning as you go in that process. So for me, marriage is a learning process, but it's a learning process that you both are growing together, mm-hmm. and learning behaviors that you're changing for the sake of each other. Mm-hmm. If you don't like something and your partner doesn't like something, you learn to change that behavior, mm-hmm. in a positive manner. You guys are supporting each other. So for me, it's a bond and a uniformed bond that you're growing together to respect and love and cherish one another. That for me is marriage. That's all I have.
I like that. Like you're giving up something because you want that person to see that, together we can grow in a positive way. Because we all come into marriages with our own baggages, it doesn't have to be poverty or extra children, but it could be attitudes that we don't know that could affect another person in a bad way. What about you, Gladys?
Yeah, so from a more clinical perspective, marriage is the union of two or more people, whether you want to look at it within the context of the United States, where polygamy is not legal, yes, but it's a union of two or more people for the purpose of family formation. So now when you go to religious context and other social constructs, you have other things that modify the way we look at it, but primarily people have come together over the years for the purpose of family formation.
Beautiful. Dorothy?
Well, I think marriage is legally said is a union of two people, right? But I personally believe that there's a lot of there's so many condiments to marriage to make it successful, right? It needs to be intimate. It needs to be emotionally supportive. That's very crucial. There needs to be commitment on both sides, not just one person committed. It needs to be commitment from both sides. It has to be in an environment where there's trust, there's care, where people know that they can grow with each other. I really like the fact that people are beginning to understand that marriage is not just a union, right? It is a dedicated, conscientious, conscious commitment to grow together. And that is what makes, to me, a successful union, right? And I prefer the term union to marriage because a union is it's on a contractual basis, and you both can decide at some point to part ways. Meanwhile, in our Cameroonian construct, marriage is like, oh, we're hinged to each other's hips till death do us part. We are taking vows and we're bound to these vows no matter what happens. Anyway, I'm sure we're going to come to that, but I guess communication, commitment, trust, emotional support, those are for me the condiments of a good marriage.
Beautiful segue into the next point of discussion. In an African context, it feels like when I came to America, I was shocked to see people say, I'm not getting married. I don't have children. Because growing up in Africa, you were expected to get married, expected to have children. And so when you start getting to the age of 30, 35, they're like, oh my God, you're not married. You start becoming that old cargo at home. So in an African context, what is marriage? Is it a bondage, Dorothy? Is it we're hooked to the hip for life? We can't separate. Even if we're choking to death, we can't move. Is that how we see marriage in Africa, in your perspective?
I think that there is the fairy tale about marriage, right? And the fairy tale about Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty, and they lived happily ever after. And there isn't any, the stories are not interspersed with the conflicts that they go through. They're not interspersed with some of the bottlenecks that they need to overcome to make this commitment to each other long lasting, right? And I think that is what happens to us in our African context. Remember, in our African context, marriage is supposed to be to make the family grow.
Yeah.
Right? Back then in the days, right? I mean, I come from a huge family, you know that. My granddad had 13 wives, right? My granddad had 73 children, my paternal granddad. And children to him were labor. There was sign of wealth.
Yeah.
Right? And slowly we're departing from that notion of we're supposed to be in a marriage where we're leaning onto our spouse, no matter which spouse we're talking about. We're supposed to be in a marriage where we're just there for procreation.
Mm-hmm.
We're getting into a space where marriage in a cultural context is a blend of many things. It's a blend of how we grew together. It's a blend of how comfortable we feel with each other, how much respect is in our union. So I think the African culture kind of pushes us to think that marriage is something that must happen.
Mm-hmm.
One,
Mm-hmm.
and when it happens, it has to stay.
Right.
You hear people telling their children, tie hat, na so married day.
Mm-hmm.
Tie hat, marry na tie hat.
Mm-hmm.
You know, no, that's not what it's supposed to be. You know, so that's to me just a little bit about the African context of marriage.
Mm-hmm. So Gladys, do you think that the African context of marriage makes marriage seem like an achievement?
Well, to answer that question, let's revisit the history of marriage and where Africa still finds herself with her mindset of marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll just be adding to what Dorothy has shared. So historically, families came together and used women as peacemakers, or to get land, or to merge families to grow bigger.
Mm-hmm.
Just like she said, her grandfather had so many wives and children for the labor, because at that time, agriculture was the main source of income and everything.
Mm-hmm.
So it made more sense to them when they had to marry more wives to have more children, because then the labor force would be better. And that's why the families that had more children were wealthier, because they could produce more agriculturally.
Mm-hmm.
So with the coming of the Industrial Revolution, people do not have to work in agricultural fields anymore. They can now go and earn outside of the home.
Mm-hmm.
And use their money to choose the wife they want.
Mm.
So in every context, somehow marriage has been an achievement, because people work to earn, say, the bride they wanted, or they married into the family, a wealthy family, or whatever they used the woman for.
Mm.
Not necessarily is that their experience, because when they marry, they think it is, for example, a trophy wife or whatever they were trying to achieve for that moment. However, the long-term experience might be different. And that's why we are today discussing divorce and its impacts on the family.
Mm. Beautiful. I like the historical perspective of it. Yes, it was an achievement, but back then the achievement was different from what it is today. Because today it feels like when a woman is married, she's achieved something. And you even find women talking to her, are you even married? Who are you talking to? Who's your husband? Where does he work? Shirley, I don't know how much of African experience you have, because I know you spent most of your life in the United States, but what do you hear from your parents about marriage in the African context?
Actually, when I was going through the divorce process for myself,
mm-hmm.
My parents are Catholic, so they have that perspective of they don't believe in divorce. So when I went through the divorce process, I was shocked, honestly, at the support of my parents.
Mm.
I was even shocked of bringing that topic to the table about divorce. So it's always believed that you should stay and deal with whatever is happening and try to solve it and make it work.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the society we're now in is changing that mentality of our parents, because it really changed it for my parents. My mom said, one of her statements were, it might be a shameful thing, but we'll be through that process with you. And I was very impressed for an African parent to state that
Mm-hmm.
was it was an eye opener for me.
Mm-hmm.
Because divorce is not something you hear of. I mean, my grandmother was like, "Are you sure that you really want to go through this?
Mm-hmm.
Are you sure?" I had my aunts who called, and they were like, because they called me Didi, just stay, just stay, just stay. And I was just like, staying for me was not an option. And I'm the first woman in my family to go through a divorce. So that alone was an eye opener for a lot of people in my family
Mm-hmm.
and for my parents. So I think there's that notion that as women, especially from an African culture,
Mm-hmm.
we're supposed to stay and put up with it.
Mm-hmm.
And put up with it. He's your husband. You took that oath. Stay and put up with it.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what tends to hurt a lot of women and children rather than help them in that situation. So I think our society is starting to change a lot. And I'm happy for that, but I think we still have a long ways to go.
We still do. We still do. I mean, that was echoing what Dorothy said, marrying a tie hat, being you have to persevere, just stay there. So your parents, go ahead.
I always have something more to add.
Sure.
There's this aspect about marriage being an achievement, especially for the girl child.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And this aspect of marriage being an achievement for the girl child is very, very prevalent in most of our African cultures.
Mm-hmm.
And with that comes this predisposition to be taken advantage of. Because I know, I swear, I was taken aback while I was doing my research for this show today. I was reading about some cultures in Nigeria. There are women in Nigeria, right? I mean, I'm picking out Nigeria. Maybe it happens in Cameroon, but I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't seen that in Cameroon. There are women in Nigeria who go as far as hiding their professional achievements in order to make themselves smaller,
so they can
get a man.
Mm-hmm. I've heard that in Nigeria.
So that they can get a man. Mm-hmm. There are people who plan their wedding before they even meet a man. They are investing. So they're putting money aside for their wedding, already have a wedding planner paid and everything paid. They just need a man to pop the question. Now, if we continue to promote such behavior in our African societies, what do you think is going to happen in those marriages?
Yeah, divorce.
Or you put up with an unhappy marriage and the cycle continues, because it's just, we are all a sum total of our traumas and our experiences in life, right?
Mm-hmm.
Meaning, just as you cope in an unhappy marriage, be it in a marriage where you're being battered or where both of you can barely stand each other, the kids, they see that and they think that's normal.
Yeah.
That becomes normal for them.
Mm-hmm.
And they grow up and they continue with that cycle and they pass that on.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody wants traumatized kids in our societies anymore. So that's just what I wanted to add to that.
It's a very good ad. And then you get into that marriage and then you get battered, like you said. And then you hear the women say, I'm just staying because of my children. Right? Yeah. But before we get into the children's part, some people might say that marriage today is not valued like our parents used to value them. It gets dissolved so quickly. Like we just get in there and then we get out. Do you ladies think that that is what it is today? Is it because we're not ready? Is it because we think that, if I get married, my parents will feel happy? They're like, oh, my daughter's married. And then I get in there, it's not what I expected. And I get out of it right away. So why do we get divorced so quickly these days? Because when you look back, your grandparents were married until they died. Most of our parents, same thing, until they died. But the younger generation is like, I'm divorced, you're divorced, she's divorced, he's divorced. What is going on? Who wants to go first?
I
Yeah,
can
I
go.
go.
Anyway, Gladys, go ahead, please.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Dorothy. I think our grandparents did not have as many options as we have at this time. Predominantly, our grandparents did not work outside of the home apart from farming. They did not do paid work. So whatever they did to feed the children, they depended solely on the breadwinner of the house, which was the male, and the relationship was based on gender dominance, which was male dominated. So after the Industrial Revolution, when men had to go work, earn income, and then the World War, where men had to go and fight, and then women had to be introduced into the labor force. Now, women had the option to go and work, do paid work, and earn their living. So they did not have to depend on the dominance of their husbands. So now that they earn their living, they have the options to not put up with bullshit.
Literally.
So unconditional acceptance doesn't mean unconditional tolerance.
I like
so
that.
So they have that option.
Wow.
Legally, they are given the option to have a no-fault divorce. So they have options. But back then, our parents and grandparents did not have options. Religiously, they were brainwashed to think they married and that was it. They could not divorce. There are many religions that still preach that. They work so hard to make you think you marry for better, for worse, till death do you part, if that's a death sentence or not. So a lot of our parents have the religious perspective of marriage. A lot of times when you talk, they don't even realize that marriage existed before religion. And even in biblical times, the kinds of marriages that are spoken of within the biblical context do not even fit in with their definition of how they want marriage to be. So there is that inconsistency. However, as we're educating ourselves, we're learning more, we're getting better. We're in that process of personal development. Now people expect more from their partners. They expect better than just being a provider. They expect a lot of their other needs, especially their emotional needs, to be met. And as Dorothy mentioned earlier, both partners most of the time are a trauma couple. And if they're struggling with their unresolved trauma, they might not even understand why they're having these problems or these attitudes or whatever they're dealing with. But at the same time, once children are involved, we're all invited to evolve.
Yeah.
And grow into better versions of ourselves. And so if a person evolves and transforms themselves and becomes a better version of themselves, and their partner is not willing to evolve because they think you are Americanizing or Westernizing, naturally you outgrow that person. And so the two mindsets become incompatible. So you have the option to evolve, to become better. You have the option for personal excellence. And if you're driven by personal excellence, you don't put up with bullshit because it draws you back.
Yeah.
Dorothy, go. Wow. I love the perspective.
I love the
Gladys.
perspective.
I do, yeah.
I really love that perspective, Gladys. But I'll go back to my definition of marriage. Commitment, mutual respect, right? That dedication to grow, the care. Did our grandparents have that? That's a big question.
Yeah.
Did our grandparents really have that in their marriages? Would you imagine a man like my granddad? Would you imagine him having that dedication, equal dedication for all 13 wives that he had?
Wow.
Would you imagine his wives being that committed to him?
Mm-hmm.
So we're talking about two different perspectives, right? And there isn't any ground for comparison, to be honest. There isn't any ground for comparison. When I get married, right, I am getting married into a partnership. I am dedicating myself into a partnership. And this partnership is for mutual respect, mutual growth. It's for harmony. It's for someone who fulfills my emotional needs just as I fulfill theirs, right? Did our grandparents have that? I beg to say no, they didn't. They really didn't. So there isn't any grounds for comparison. Like Gladys really said, that we're on a different cultural landscape at the moment. There isn't any comparison, you know. And I was listening to Michelle Obama's podcast a couple of days or a couple of weeks back, and she actually talked about an anecdote about marriage and children. She says, children, and I just want to use this just to underscore what Gladys said about children being in the marriage and we come face to face with our traumas. She said, children, when they get into a marriage, you get confronted with the innate tensions, the innate cracks of that marriage. She says, she compared it to the BMW car manufacturing quality assurance test. She says when they build a car, the BMW, I think it's either BMW or Mercedes, I don't know, but one of these German cars, like when they're done building the car, they actually shake up the car to find out if there's any loose ends or any loose screws. And if there's anything that falls down, then this car is not ready for it. It doesn't pass the quality assurance. And that's what children do to us in our marriages.
Wow.
Like they come in, they shake us up, right? And they're like, okay, are there any cracks? Are there any fissures? Are there any loose ends? Right? Then please work on that because I'm here. I'm here. I demand of you to work on all of those cracks. So marriage per se, especially in our context that we're having now, and having children, because we're all three mothers, all four of us though, but we're three divorcees on the call. When you have children, you start doing that introspection. Is this what I want to give to my child? If this is what you're comfortable handing over to your child, then good for you. But in most cases, most mothers, and even in some cases, some fathers, they tend to realize this isn't what I want to pass on to my children. This really isn't what I want to pass on to my children. And the two options, you better bend down and work on your marriage, or you bid your marriage goodbye. So,
So Shirley, your parents were very supportive of you, and your mom said it's a shame, but we'll go through it with you. Did they think that you, as a younger version of them, was impatient in your marriage? Because I think that, I believe that they would have their own difficult times as well, but they're still together. Did they even think that you are impatient? Is that why we get these marriages dissolved so quickly these days, because of impatience?
Well, I was married for 9 years. And my mother played a role in, to be honest, in solving some of our issues when things happen. I think I was patient in my marriage. I think the breaking point for me was, this is either a life or death. And when that life or death came into play, it took that impatience out the window. and my parents were seeing it as, my child is unhappy and she needs to be happy.
Mm.
And her happiness counts more than anything. Her life is important. So I think the point where I had reached, my parents said, okay, we're going to follow what you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's on you. I think I was more nervous when I had the conversation with my dad.
Mm.
And my mom is both my parents are very understanding. But my dad is to the book, by the book. So the day I met him on the table to have that conversation, it was nerve-wracking. And he looked up at me and he said, "Are you happy?" I said, "No." He said, "Do you feel like you should go back?" I said, "No." And he said, "Then the ball's in your court."
Mm.
And for me, I needed to hear that. I needed that validation from my parents. I think that's what I needed the most, was that validation to know that I'm doing the right thing. That I had done enough to make sure my marriage had worked.
Mm-hmm.
But when I had that validation, it seemed to put me at ease to proceed with my decision. Because trust me, there were instances where I was like, I'm going back. I'm going back. I'm going back.
Mm-hmm.
But I remembered, I don't want to go back in a situation where the behaviors are not behaviors I want my kids to learn.
Mm.
So I need to make that decision for myself and my children. So I think that impatience, everybody is different. Everybody's situation is different. But I want to touch on the point that I think nowadays, and I know I might get some beat up for this, but not so much on the women's part. I think so much on the men's part. Men have this notion that they can find something better out there than what they have at home. Rather than working on it, they think there's a better option. The grass is greener on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe so some women as well. I'm not just going to throw all men under the bus, but maybe some women. It's both ways. But I think now we just don't have, we become tolerant of certain behaviors, and then in some aspects we just feel like we won't tolerate this, and rather than working on it, we move on so quickly.
Mm-hmm.
In some instances, and it becomes frustrating because then you see something in your partner that you want them to work on and change that behavior, but they're not willing to do that. I mean, I wanted to go to therapy, but my partner didn't believe in therapy.
Mm-hmm.
So how patient can you be?
So we lose knots, like the anecdote that Dorothy gave from Michelle Obama's podcast.
Exactly.
Shook you, and those loose knots were not willing to be tied.
Exactly.
Mm.
Exactly. And then there's this notion too that comes into play that therapy, as Africans, why go to therapy?
We don't.
Right? Like,
therapy is not for Black people, not just Africans, for Black people.
No,
Mm-hmm.
we don't do therapy. And sometimes that's necessary in order to bring back that bond, I think. I think it doesn't make you less of a person or less of a man or woman to go to therapy.
Mm-hmm.
I think therapy heals a lot of things in your marriage that have been broken. And a lot of Africans and Black people, we tend not to want to see that or use or utilize those services that are out there. Whereas if we're utilizing those services, we're bettering ourselves and our marriage and helping our children.
Yeah.
See that we're building a healthy relationship.
Mm. We will touch more on that. Dorothy has been so vocal about seeing a therapy before on my show, but I'll stay with you for a little bit, Shirley. Do you feel any shame about getting divorced? Is there a shame in going through that process? Did you feel that? Do you think there should be?
I did when I first went through the divorce because I was the one who filed for the divorce. But in the years, I've grown to believe that there's nothing wrong with that.
Mm.
I had my faults. I did not have to come to public and, speak of my faults in my marriage. I accepted those faults in my own ways, in my own personal and private ways, by whether it's going to church to talk to my pastor or just dealing with it on my own. And I did all those things and rectified that. So I think every individual is different in how they deal with that process. But shaming someone for going through a divorce, I always tell people, I say, you never know if it could be you. Don't shame me for a decision I made, something that was better for myself and for my kids and for my family, because you could be in that same position. And
Absolutely.
that judgment is not for you to do.
Dorothy.
That's not for anybody.
Yeah, it's a shame in getting a divorce. Should we be shaming people? Should we feel ashamed if we're the ones getting divorced?
So there's something that we all are aware of. No one gets into a marriage to fail. You get into a marriage, it's like an investment, an emotional investment. It's time invested. It's years. I was married for almost 10 years, right? I was in this relationship for 12 years. It was me dedicating my all, putting in my energy to make sure that we go across the finishing line, even if it meant dying together, holding each other's hands or dying in each other's arms as romantically as we want to.
Romeo and Juliet.
Yes. And per se, I am a very romantic woman. I am a very emotional, harmonious.
Very giving. I know you. Yeah.
Yeah. I am very giving. And so when I came to the point where, just like Shirley, the divorce came from me, right? When I came to the point where I had to file for divorce, mind you, I had separated from my husband, my ex-husband, 3 times, 3 good times, right? And when I came to the point where I actually filed for divorce, I felt like a failure. I really felt like a failure. And it is normal. It is a normal feeling because you've put in so much, you've put in your all, and we grow up in a society where you're shamed for not achieving everlasting marriage. You're shamed for not, being. I know I can recall one of my friends telling me in one of my friends' wedding, that's a small personal story. We were attending a wedding and a friend of mine said, when we were about to give like counseling, we're in a circle and just giving counseling and just talking to them. And I was about to speak and he was like, when people they talk, I bet you not talk.
Because you're divorced.
You're a divorcee.
Oh my God.
You want to give them a bad advice or you want to give them a good advice? Like, who are you to, and that is a statement that hurt me until today. It hurts. It hurts, right? Because me, in my innermost self, I had considered myself a failure in the marriage. But when I came to terms with my divorce, I considered myself a survivor. I still consider myself a combative woman, a strong, courageous woman. I turned the tides. The tides were against me. There was nothing. I left my marriage with nothing. I stepped into the dark. But I was so lucky, thanks to my conviction that I was doing the right thing. My feet fell on solid ground, and I am feeling it today. I am a combative woman. I am teaching my kids to fight for themselves, to stand their ground, to be stronger against all odds. And I am proud that I went through my marriage and that I went through my divorce and that I am a proud divorcee. Yeah.
Somebody might say that, look at these girls talking about filing for divorce. Who gave African women that audacity to be the ones to go and start filing for divorce? Because growing up in Cameroon where we have Muslims, I know about the Muslim culture where the man just needs to stand out and yell 5 times that I divorce you, I divorce you, I divorce you, I divorce you, and then you're done with him. So things have really, really changed today, and going through the emotions, going through the process, and even beating the shame, you survived. Gladys, tell us about your story. Did you have any shame? Do you think we should shame women who are divorced or who are going through divorce? Do you think that should even be a point?
So let's look at it this way. The statistics are 50% of divorce of marriages end in a divorce, right?
50%.
Yes.
So half of it.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So those who are courageous enough, like Dorothy and Shirley, are the ones with the bravery to say, this is not what I signed up for. If you're not going to work on this and improve yourself and evolve and grow with me, I cannot do this with you. Those are the brave ones, right? Of the remaining 50%, do you think they are happy, healthy, long-term relationships?
Not all of them.
Right. Do you notice the smiles on the faces of these women here? You notice the peace with which Shirley speaks? Go among her friends. If you know the signs of depression, look through the Facebook posts of those happy couples who post and shame people who go through a divorce. You see deep depression in their eyes. There is nothing to be ashamed of. They are the brave ones who are willing to speak the truth and say, this is not healthy. This is not what I thought it was. I made a mistake. Like Shirley has said, she's not perfect. We're not perfect. I made a mistake and I am bold enough to correct my mistake. So I am humble, but I am proud of myself for my journey. It is a process of rebirth. You go back, you heal yourself, you reinvent yourself, and you come out brave, powerful. You come out the lioness you're supposed to be. And if anyone is not willing, or if anyone cannot handle your bravery, guess what? They were not meant to be a part of the end of your story. They were just the chapter. Be comfortable with the chapter, the character they played in that chapter. And when it's time to move on, you move on to the greater version of you with pride.
Rich,
yes,
sister.
Yes.
Rich.
Sorry, I just wanna follow up on what Sister Gladys said. I come from a family where I'm the only girl, the firstborn. I have 3 brothers, and while I was married, it was always, we're never gonna amount to anything. When I got divorced, I made myself a promise. I think Mabel can speak to this. When I got divorced, that's why I say there's no shame in leaving a divorce, being divorced. I went back to school and I told myself I'm gonna graduate.
Yeah.
Last May, I graduated. And I'm walking on air.
Yeah.
I left that marriage maybe with nothing, but I feel like I've gained the world. Because I'm doing things for myself and for my boys. About a month ago, I was on my couch. That's why I say, women, please don't be ashamed of going through this process. If you've put up with it for far too long and you feel like there's no end, it's okay to walk away. I was on the couch doing my assignment for my master's, and my son sat next to me and he said, my oldest son, and he said, Mommy, I have something to tell you. And I said, go ahead. And he said, I just want to say I'm proud of who you are.
Oh my God. How old is he?
10.
Wow.
And he said, I hope I can go to school and be just like you. And I sat on that couch. I was telling my mom about it. I sat on that couch and I said, what an impact I'm making on my kids. Before I want to tell a little bit of how far I've come.
Please do.
Before I graduated in May, I was in respiratory therapy school and I was going to school 2 hours away. I failed by 1 point. I came back and I was like, I cried and cried and cried and cried. I picked up the phone and I called my brother. He said, do you know the kind of strength you have? And I said, I don't. Sometimes I doubt myself.
Mm-hmm.
He said, Shirley, you've come this far. You can keep going.
Mm-hmm.
I said, no. I threw my hands up in the air. I said, I'm done. Everything they were saying about me is the truth. I'm not good enough. I'm not going to make it. I'm not going to amount to anything. And then I'm like, you know what? This is not the end of it. I'm going back to school. Again, after failing, I re-enrolled at Bethel University. Wow. And I pushed myself. So I want to be that sense of encouragement for women that think that if I leave a marriage, how am I going to survive?
Mm-hmm.
You can with the right circle around you.
Exactly.
With the right people around you. I thank God for my family, my parents, my aunts, my brothers every day, and my children for giving me that motivation. But with the right circle and the right people on your side, you can and you will make it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. I like Gladys's perspective. You're such a motivation with these women. But when you went through divorce, did you feel any shame personally? Because you're so good at motivating others. Was your light just shining like, oh, I don't care what about because I know all this in the books and I'm following it and I think I'll be okay. How did you feel?
For me, is that for me?
For you, yes. How did you feel? Did you have any personal shame?
No. So my story, for me, it was a victory. It's one of my personal victories. I had to do it. If not, I was done. I had to, because there was a ton going on in the background, and people would not believe when I shared my experiences, because my stories did not match with what people thought.
That's why I asked, because not to cut you short, because I bought your book, right, in which you talked about your story, but it was so motivational. I'm thinking, what is she talking about here? I wish I bought the book to the show to show people, because you have a book that you wrote about, your situation, but it is so positive, Dorothy, that I'm like, are you okay?
Right. So by the time I went through the divorce, I had compiled a ton of evidence to back up my claims. Just like Dorothy said, she made 3 attempts to leave and they were unsuccessful. I made more than 3. And one day a lawyer sat me down and said, I believe you, but you need evidence. So I went back, I took a ton of videos of multiple instances to back up every police report I made, every claim I made. I documented everything. So the day I filed for the divorce, I filed with the evidence and everything compiled such that no matter what he did, all the documentation was already in court. He had nothing else to do but to negotiate. Wow.
Girl, when you talk about all the evidence, it sounds like a lot of work. I had heard somebody say a long time ago that I want to get married, but I don't want the law to be involved. Because when the law get involved in your marriage, it's so easy, seamless. It seems so seamless to get the marriage license. But when it comes to breaking it apart, it's like, I have to prove that I don't want this. I didn't have to prove to get into it. I just said I love this person and the person loved me and then we go get a license. But why do I have to prove this now to get out? So let me ask you this question. Is there a right time to get a divorce? What is that thing that makes you get a divorce? Because I've heard, like I said earlier, parents say, I stay because of my children. All of you have children, but you got out. What was the thing that triggered that getting out? When is the time, and is there a right time to get a divorce? Dorothy.
Gladys, go first. Gladys
she's pumped. I like it.
Pumped.
Yeah, let me. Yeah, thank you, Dorothy. So our stories and our experiences are unique to us.
They are, yeah.
Depending on what happened, what your experience was.
Mhm.
In my case, it was domestic violence, a ton of violence. And so that kind of a case is a case against the state. So you need the evidence because, again, people can tell lies to say they have been battered, or people do lie.
Mhm.
That's true. Yeah. So if you're bringing up your case, and usually people who are victims do not want to put the perpetrator in problems, so they will hide and enable the behavior. So it is important to have your evidence when you file the case. If not, it becomes his word against your word, or her word against his word. So I knew that I needed that evidence. And from the day I compiled all the evidence that I needed, and even shared it, rubbed it in the faces of his family, I vindicated myself. So I was very happy. I owed no explanation to anyone. I was so excited that I got rid of this toxicity in my life. So there was no shame associated because I had my evidence.
So it was your time. So you think your time was too much of the domestic abuse, and you
Yes,
just had
I
to
stayed
get it.
longer than I needed to. Fortunately, I have been in the therapy world for as long as I've had my kids. So I can do a lot of interventions for them. I started doing education for them even before I left. But it was way overdue when I had to leave.
Wow. So let's go back to Dorothy. When is that time to get a divorce?
So Gladys is talking about domestic abuse, but physical, right? What I went through, I personally did not even understand what I was going through because it was emotional. It was something that eroded my self-worth. I became a cocoon of myself, right? And not even knowing what was going on. There wasn't, like Gladys and Shelley just said, yes, because there's certain things that you cannot even prove. How do you prove that someone, your spouse, doesn't talk to you for up to 2 months in the house? But when people come in, the moment people step into the house, and he turns into the best guest host, he's like, do you want wine? Baby, can you get a glass? He cleans the table, and I'm in a surreal world, in a different world than the one that I have been living in just minutes before people got into my home, and there is a lot of manipulation, and there's no proof. The law doesn't even. So I live in Germany. The law doesn't even recognize emotional abuse. The law, there's no way you can prove emotional abuse. How do you prove it? So on one hand, I was going through that, and then when you go through emotional abuse, you're so you're just a shadow of yourself. Right. And that's why I'm so proud of myself. Like, I celebrate myself every single day. I left my husband, and where I am now professionally, right, is like when I was leaving my husband, he told me, you will suffer.
I remember that. Yeah, I've
You will
listened to your
suffer.
talk.
You will not get a finish. A finish used to be the scent that people used to use in Germany when we were using the Deutsche Mark. So before the euros came in, you will not get a pfennig from me. And I am proud. I live in my house by myself. I haven't had a pfennig from him. I take care of my kids. I am thriving financially. I am thriving emotionally. I am thriving. I am more than thriving professionally. You know, so let me get back to the question. When is the best time to leave? There's no best time. There is no best time. Listen to yourself. Listen to your body. I was talking to my therapist, and my therapist was like, Dorothy, what you were suffering from is PTSD. I would see a message from my husband, my ex-husband, and I would tremble. And I would tremble, like I was physically trembling and crying when his messages would come into my phone. I would ignore them for days. I wasn't sleeping. I was suffering from insomnia for 2 good years after leaving him. Insomnia. I wasn't sleeping a wink. I wasn't sleeping a wink, and I was being terrorized by him, but furtively, not like he comes to you and says, no, I will show you Pepe or something. No, it's just like sneakily telling my kids that I'm a bad mother, telling my kids that I want to take them away from him. My kids will come to me and they're crying. We're in a co-parenting situation. My kids live with him for 1 week and they live with me for 1 week until now. And I was so generous to make that happen because I was like, they're boys, they're living in a white dominated society. They need their father, you know. So when is the right time to leave? I'll start with the fact that when you feel that you're not being respected in that relationship for a long stretch of period of time. So we all have our mood swings. So the times you'll be like, please don't talk to me. Yeah. No, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about that disrespect that makes you feel like you want the floor to cover you. When you feel that, like in Gladys' case, there's been a long stretch of domestic abuse, there is no reason, ladies, there is no reason for any person in the world to raise a hand on another. There's no reason. The moment someone raises their hands on you, it's gone too far. There's no freaking reason. And we need to put that into the heads of, I'm not talking about only women, both women and men, because men
are being abused too.
We're being abused physically. Both of them. Don't let that happen in your marriage. Okay? And then there is also the aspect of financial abuse that we don't talk about.
Yeah.
Financial abuse. When you're being abused financially, when someone, you know, I was made worthless in my marriage. I was told, you're like a market woman. Without me, you will not exist. Without me, you cannot. What do you bring into this house because of the chicken change you bring into this house? I would open the tap the way I want, flush the toilets the way I want. I pay the rent in this house. I pay the utility bills. You think your chicken change makes any difference? So when there is that financial abuse, guys, when there's that denigration of your person, of your worth, and when you have a feeling that you're living someone's life, you're not living your life, you cannot achieve your own dream, it is time to work on the loose ends. Like I said, I'll go back to say, I love marriage. I love a good, harmonious, respectful, trust-based marriage. But when these things happen and they're colliding with your personality and your personal goals and ambitions, right? And you're suffering from those growing pains, you're like, okay, I don't fit in here anymore. Go to therapy, guys. Go to therapy. There's a lot you can get from therapy. And if therapy doesn't work, then please get out. Please get out. The people who say I stayed in for my children, there is no right or wrong answer. I left because of my children. I left my marriage because I knew I would be able to inculcate better behaviors for my children, teach them better ways. They are boys. They need to learn to treat a woman with respect, they need to learn to value themselves. They need to break the chain of abuse. I left and I said, it ends with me. It ends with me. This chain of abuse ends with me. It's not going to pass on to my children.
Oh, wow. Shirley, I think you have something to say to that before we go on to the next discussion point.
So, without getting too deep into my breaking point, which I have never shared with the world, is I went to jail.
Oh my goodness.
That was the breaking point for me. We had an argument. Things got bad. Police was called because in self-defense, I was defending myself. The explanation was not even left for me to give by the police. It was put your hands behind your back and get in the squad car. So I was put in the squad car and told to call someone to come take my kids. Due to my ex-husband interrupting a 911 call that was placed by me, he was also facing time. So I said, and then the process of my children going into foster care was not an option. So it therefore became everything was my fault. I take the blame for it. And that is how I ended up in jail. And then it was, you have a restraining order not to return back to the house. And if you have to go back to your home, it's with a police officer. Then I moved in with my parents for quite a while. And then it just became,
There's no right or wrong answer, like Dorothy said. She left because of her children. What you did because of your own breaking point. There's no right or wrong answer. People stay because of your children. People leave because of their children. People don't want to even stay because they don't care. They have a different lifestyle. So yes, there's no wrong or right answer. And thank you so much for sharing that. I think that women need to hear more of this, because a lot of times we stay in marriage, like Gladys said, but when we go outside, you can see our faces are so heavy. You can read abuse on our faces, right? But we stay because we want to please our parents or please our culture or please our religion. I don't know. So then why is the world frowning so much on divorce if there is so much abuse in marriages to start with? Why? Why can't the world say, hey, it's okay to get out? Generally, it's like, you are divorced, like Dorothy's little story. You want to talk? Instead, being divorced gives you the right to speak because you've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. But why is the world so frowning?
Yeah, there is the general notion that the world frowns on divorce, and I beg to differ. Thing is, people like us talking loud and talking, I'll give you a perfect example. Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt. And Angelina Jolie is talking about Brad Pitt being abusive. And everyone is painting Angelina Jolie with a vindictive brush. Right? So that's a prominent example. We're looking at Donald Trump and his wife, and you can see a woman who has been folded, twisted,
Must
and
be
pushed
something.
into a corner, into a wreck. And the whole world is watching, and practically applauding, So that is that. So women like us will stand out, who talk about our stories, or men. I really encourage men to talk about their stories, their divorce stories, their separation stories. I really encourage that, because we share these stories. And I remember, Mabel, I was on one of your shows about emotional abuse, and I was saying I share my story so passionately because if I can make one woman realize that emotional abuse is not okay, one woman in 10 years, then hey, I'm proud of myself.
Yeah.
Okay. So there is that part of people turning a blind eye to bad marriages or defecating on women who have left their marriages. Usually it's women. It's usually women, because if a man leaves and gets on with his life, he's celebrated, right? But usually it's the woman who is like, oh, na aquara. So anyway,
to touch on that subject, sorry. My ex-husband is obviously remarried. I find it difficult to date because there's that stigmatism of she's divorced.
Yeah.
Oh, she's moving on. Oh, how dare her move on? And it's like, but he's moved on.
Why women? When I lost my husband, Dorothy, it took me 6 years. 6 years to say, okay, I need to, you don't move on, you live on. You need to live your life. But I know men who lose their spouses and they marry the next year or two. And it's okay. Why are women shamed so much in our African communities? Why? But at work, my white worker asked me, are you dating? After 3 months, I'm like, no. I mean, no, I'm not even emotionally stable. And then I look back at my culture, they'll just think that I'm a prostitute, right? So why do we have that tied so much on us as women? Why? We have a life to live to. Gladys, go ahead.
Right. So there is the cultural context within the African community, and that is changing. We have come a long way. But usually, I'd like you to look at it like this. The people who talk down on others who are doing things that they did not have the bravery to do, they're usually projecting their own low self-esteem, regret, and self-doubt. That's what they're projecting onto the other person because it is their fear. They know that they're not in a happy relationship. Secretly, they admire this person for being bold enough to take a stand for themselves. But they regret that they don't have that bravery. So what do? They project that regret onto us to make us feel down like they do. So if you're out there and you're going through a hard time and somebody speaks any form of dirt on you, don't take it personal. They are telling you subconsciously what they think about themselves, how they feel about themselves. That's what they're projecting on you. It has nothing to do with you. It has to do with them not being willing to face their truth, that they are miserable and ashamed to face it because they are afraid of being bold enough to go out like Dorothy did and build a life for herself from scratch.
I am so proud of Dorothy, having known her for so many years. And when she first talked about her story to me, and I was one of her conferences. I couldn't believe it because, like I said, we were roommates for so long. And when you get battered in a marriage and you get to that low point that you can't even recognize yourself, and if you knew that person, it's even hard to believe that somebody, another human being, could make you feel so worthless. I am so proud of each and every one of you for what you're doing beyond your marriage. And all of you have children, boys and girls, you know, and before we get into talking about raising kids in these divorced homes, let me ask you a very open-ended question. Is marriage overrated?
Definitely.
You all say yes.
Yeah, for me, definitely. I think you can go on. I don't have a boyfriend. I am not looking for a boyfriend. I don't want to have a fixed relationship with anybody, but I am happy. I am happy, and I am living a purposeful life than I was living in my marriage. I am living a happier life. I love myself. I have learned to know I have learned, guys, like it's incredible. I have learned to enjoy my company. I didn't know what it meant to be alone. I didn't have that. I haven't had that for forever. And I love my company. Like there are times people are calling me and can I come over? I'm like, I'm sorry, this weekend is my me weekend. Let's do that some other time. Because I am enjoying my company. You know, I love my peace. I am very, very, very territorial when it comes to my peace. So I have learned, and that's the part of growth that I impart on people. I have learned to be the architect of my life, you know, to take over the strings of my life, to take over the wheels. So I am very, very unremorseful about cutting people off my life. That's something that I am very open about. I am, if you're obstructing my peace, I don't care what my relationship with you is. I don't care what definition society has ascribed to my relationship with you. Be you a sibling, be you a relative, an auntie, uncle, friend, intimate friend, internet. No, I have taken over my life and I am loving it.
You say it with so much conviction. I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
Shirley, is marriage overrated?
I think it is. I always say to myself, I don't know if I want to get remarried again. But I have to really magnify what Dorothy is saying. I am the happiest I have been in years. I get to do things I want to do, what Shirley wants to do. And no one is coming in to tell me, oh, we are on a budget. Oh, we need to look at this. Oh, you can't do that. I am doing what Shirley wants to do. I am living my life. I am happy. I am in a place where I'm at peace. I am so at peace that I'm just like, I'm unbothered. I am very unbothered. And that's another thing that Dorothy said. I have learned to cut people off because at some point it was like, I think I'm just tolerating certain behaviors because I feel like I need these people. Not that you don't necessarily need them. I just don't want to deal with certain behaviors.
Exactly.
I just can't put up with it.
I love you from a distance.
Yes. We are friends from a distance. I respect you from a distance. But at this moment, I'm not going to deal with that. I think it speaks volumes.
Yes.
It speaks so much volume. And I think people are taken back by that when it's coming from me now because they're like, well, many years ago, she wouldn't even say a word because I was just treading lightly. And I have gained that also motivation
And confidence.
husband as well, because there are certain things that are said to me in emails that I'm like, I'm not putting up with this bullshit. I'm not going to put up with it. I'm sorry. But the line ends here. You're not going to cross that boundary of disrespecting me. I think as women, we need to learn that we can't tolerate certain behaviors. It just can't happen, whether it be from anybody.
Can I just say one thing that really strikes me? So before Gladys gets in, there is this aspect of abuse, of the trauma that we've carried on in our marriages. It makes you feel like you're weightless, you're walking on eggshells, you're so used to trying not to ruffle the situation, not to make people angry. You're used to calming the waves and you get weightless. And then when you get out of it and you work on yourself, Mabel, you know me, I'm a proponent of therapy. So I encourage every woman to go through therapy, or any person, go through that counseling. And then when you go through it and you kind of purge yourself of all of that weightlessness, you leave your footprints in the sand. You stamp around because you know that your boundaries are non-negotiable. You don't negotiate your boundaries with anybody, even with your own self. You tell yourself, these are my boundaries, and nobody crosses them. And that weight that you gain is the weight of rediscovery, reinventing your own self.
Rebirth, like you said.
Rebirth. I tell you, when Gladys was talking about rebirth, and I just want to say something. When I had a conversation with my sister. My sister is amazing. And Julia said, Dorothy, you broke into pieces to leave your marriage. And then you came out and you're erecting all of those pieces back up, and I feel like you're Iron Woman at the moment. And that image that my sister put in my head, right, it stayed put, because I really broke myself, like I was in tatters to get out. I was a broken person. And to get out, I just needed to crash, to come out as a pulp. And now I'm building myself into a solid Dorothy.
So proud of you.
Yeah.
So proud of you. It's hard when you know someone to imagine someone treating them bad as they treated you, Dorothy, because like I said, I can't stop saying how much I know you. Before today, we worked at the radio together in Cameroon. We went to the same university. We were roommates. And to think that a man would treat you badly, it's not that giving, Dorothy. You're such a sacrificial person. But I'm glad to see you, glowing today. Now to Gladys, is marriage overrated? As an individual and also as somebody who is in the marriage counseling world.
So I want us to have a clear differentiation between the marital relationship as a sub-relationship independent from the family relationship. Unhealthy marriages are overrated, and we have the majority of marriages are unhealthy. Nobody wants to talk about that truth, but it is the lived experience for which we have statistics. The family arena, which is where we have been programmed to think of marriage, because people marry and form families, which provides the structure for a foundation for children. A healthy family relationship, a healthy family arena can never be overrated.
Yes.
Because the family is the cornerstone for society. But a marriage will only make a healthy family if the members of that marriage are healthy.
You know what? She runs a show called Healthy Lovers Club. I'm just I see her just broadcasting it. I'm like, where have I heard this before? It's on your show. Come on. It's so beautiful.
Right.
Fun.
Right. So if we can look at ourselves as the individuals that come together to form the marriage, which forms the family, because the children are looking for leadership within a structured environment,
You're your child's first and
which is the
important.
family system. The children need balance from both the mother and the father figures. But that balance needs to be a healthy balance.
Yeah.
So we would prefer for children to be raised in healthy family structures, not necessarily marital institutions.
Dorothy, yeah, echoing your point.
I don't know if that makes
It
sense.
makes a lot of sense.
It makes so much sense.
So getting out of a bad marriage or a toxic relationship, you work on yourself, become the better version of yourself so that you can be the parent that your children need. And finding another person who works on themselves too. Because it is a process of self-development, of growth. As Dorothy said, growing together, right? So that the children can have that structural foundation of a family. Because if we keep the family structure, if we limit it to a marital relationship, it becomes a very narrow perspective, and it takes us back to where people think they need to be married in order to raise a healthy family. They don't. But they need to be healthy lovers in order to be partners in a healthy family arena.
I totally concur.
Absolutely.
Totally concur.
Absolutely. So you just kind of took us into those children who are being raised, in these separated homes. How do you do it? Is it different when you have boys or when you have girls? Dorothy, you're so vocal about how you raise your children, how you educate them even on genitals at this age and on sex, and you have the talk with them, and you know that they need their father to become good men, and you need to teach them how to respect women and become the men that you like them to become. Now, people would say it's easier when you are in the same house raising children, but now you are apart. How do you manage that? Do you believe that what you instill in them is what their father instills in them, even though both of you as parents do not agree on certain things?
So I'll be clear about one thing. My ex-husband and I were not even on talking terms. We don't talk to each other. Everything, so that's one of my boundaries, right? Everything that we have to have as a conversation is written. It's written because, I believe that the more you open yourself to this person, the more you get abused. No matter how no matter from what distance or how far apart you guys have been living. Now, in such a construct, right? Like Gladys says, it's important for you. It becomes really, really important for you to rebuild yourself to become a solid version of yourself, because you cannot erase what he does to his children. You cannot. What you can do is really consolidate your purposeful, conscious upbringing of your children. So in an emotional abusive situation, the abuse that goes on even to the children. It goes on. It is a fact that even in studies, it's been proven. And that makes you, that there's been so many situations where narcissistic parents, right, they tend to pull their kids away from the abused parent. They actually win the kids over because they manipulate the good, very good at manipulation. But I do my part as an excellent parent. I do my part as building the foundation that my children know I can always rely on her. No matter in what shape I come back to her, I know that this is a place, this is a pillow where I can find comfort. I know that this is a place where love resides. I know that this is a place where I am respected. I know that this is a place where I get propped up. And as long as you, that parent, you decide that that's the way forward, you're already doing your best in creating that family arena, right, that Gladys is mentioning, because you're the stronger force in bringing up the children. So that's exactly what I do. I am very, very, I mean, we've talked at length about what I do with my children. I talk to them. I have conversations with them. I sit down
like conversations, which I really admire. Yeah.
Yes, I have real conversations with them. We're talking about sex. We're talking. My son goes to school and they're doing sexual education, and he's the only one who knows what a condom is, because I have those conversations with them. Not only that, I talk to them about the needs for them to set their boundaries. So I tell them, if you don't want me to do this, say it. Just like I'm saying, I'm very, very peculiar about my bed. I said, I like my bed to be made up, and I don't like my bed to have creases. And please, when you jump around, you can play in my room, but please don't jump on my bed. And they know that that's a no-go area. They've grown into it. They know that that's a boundary for mama. Mama doesn't like people. And even when they bring their friends home and they're running around and they're like, oh, don't touch my mom's bed. Don't even put your finger on it. So I've taught them to respect their boundaries, just as I'm teaching them to respect mine. And by that, they're growing and learning that their boundaries to respect from other people, and other people need to respect theirs.
Awesome. Shirley, how do you juggle raising children in a separated household?
So my ex-husband and I actually, every way we communicate is via email. Has to be. There's no other way. But I have learned not to overstep my boundaries into what he does at his home. I have learned that I do my part as a mom. I teach my boys what's good. I teach them life skills. We have a responsibility chart that they abide by, and if they fill the responsibility chart, they get a prize. Teach them about respecting others. Just kind of what what you're supposed to do to be a better human being.
Mhm.
That's what I teach them. Be kind, be polite. We have conversations. I think I've been doing this more with my older son, is where I pull him in and have a one-to-one conversation with him. Tell me how you feel. Tell me what's going on in your mind. Do you have any bad thoughts? Do you have any good thoughts? What can I help you with? What can I assist you with? And then I kind of do those limited conversations with the younger ones. Not that they don't understand, but they're not quite at that stage where my 10-year-old is. So we have those conversations. And then it also kind of helps me that I have their grandfather and their 3 uncles that kind of take that fatherly role on to kind of step in and have those conversations with them as men, that I might not be able to have that conversation because they're looking at that perspective as I'm mommy.
Mhm.
I still give their dad that due respect to play his role as a father, because he is their dad.
Mhm.
And whatever conversations he wants to have with them, that's on his terms. But I do my part as a mom by having those conversations that are necessary for them to understand what society entails and what they're supposed to do as men and how they're supposed to respect women. And just setting those boundaries with them and understanding that you have to respect someone's space and not speak up when something is bothering you. I think that is my main focus with them.
Yeah.
Is speak up when something is bothering you. If you don't speak up, I don't know how to help you. If you don't speak up, I don't know how to explain those things to you. If you don't speak up, I don't know that you're disturbed by this action. So my kids are learning to be very vocal. And at times I'm like, wait a minute, maybe I shouldn't have done that with them because now they're becoming too vocal. But it's good. It's good for them to state those things, because sometimes my older son will be like, I didn't like what you said. And I'm like, okay, how can I correct that to make it better for you? How do I do better by you? Like, what do I do as a mom to make you feel comfortable in that situation? And he'll tell me, Mommy, I think you should have said it this way. I think you should have said it this way. I think this way was polite. And when they're also doing things to me that it's like making me upset, I say, do you think that was a good behavior for Mommy? Can we recheck that? Can you take a minute to think about that behavior? And so I am doing my role as a mom. And as Dorothy touched, if you don't build yourself up to come to that place where you're comfortable, you will never be able to help your children grow. I play my part as a mom. I do what I need to do as a mom. I tend not to overstep my boundaries unless it becomes a red flag. So then I speak up and say, do you think that maybe we should take this route? And then, well, that whole conversation always goes sideways.
That's great. I feel like this whole conversation about, children from a separated home is going to be a whole topic of its own. It's a whole new show. But to wrap up this segment, I'd like Gladys to touch on resources that we have available out there for children who are, raised in such separated homes. What resources do you have, especially for children in our African communities? Because we don't seem to address emotions very well in African communities when it comes to our children, even ourselves. So what resources do you have for such children?
At schools, they do have social workers at the schools. And if the child needs therapy at the school, it is important for the child to see a therapist. And of course, you can't be telling your child to do something you are not doing. The children need intervention just as the parents need intervention. And let me clarify why I say that. So while we are still participating in the toxicity of the unhealthy relationships, right? We learn many coping strategies. Usually, we learn to try to please the perpetrator, and a lot of times they flip roles. Even though one person comes out complaining as the victim and then the other one is the aggressor, or yes. But the children watch and they start picking up those same roles we play in our relationships. So one child might start presenting with symptoms of people pleasing, being quiet, being the one that wants to walk on eggshells, just like mommy walks on eggshells. So when you finally awaken and you come out of that relationship, it is not just a process of rebuilding you. It's also rebuilding the children. So it is important not only to have therapy for yourself, but to have therapy for the children, and to have that healing to go between you, the children, and or if their father wants or doesn't want, you respect that. But know that the healing, like Dorothy said, this ends with me. This ends with my generation. So that healing needs to occur not only between you and the children, so that the children start learning healthier interpersonal relationship skills. So please find a therapist, a culturally competent therapist, and do the interventions the way they need to be done. Believe it or not, neuroscience actually has evidence that the depression from a mother is passed on to the unborn child. So before you even gave birth to the child, you already passed on the trauma. I have news for you. You can pray in tongues. Your pastor can do as much sacrificing and fasting. You can offer as many masses, pray the rosary and everything. It does not substitute for skilled therapy.
It does not. I had a neurosurgeon on the show recently who did confirm that sometimes we have children who come out with things like diseases that you're not even sure where they came from, because you have carried it on to yourself throughout your pregnancy, and so you unconsciously pass it to your child. So it's good for us to be healthy at any time of our life, because we pass it to our children biologically and also through interpersonal relationships. Ladies,
maybe just one thing that I'd like to say. It is important for the kids to be left out of disputes. It's important. It's really like, this is for me like the most important part in being a parent, a single parent, and him doing his own thing. There's no way I would say that my ex is not a good parent. He's an excellent parent in his own way, an excellent parent, right? So there's nothing that would require me to badmouth him on his children.
Your children, yeah.
To his children. I will never do that. And I think that that's something that we need to learn to respect. Keep the children away from all of these barbed wires. I call them barbed wires because they really prick children and they leave scars, and be honest in schools. Like in my children's schools, I went to school and I sat with your class teachers and I told them, this is what we are going through at home. I know that most African parents are, don't go out and dry your dirty linen in public. No, I do. I'm drying it in public. So I went to school and I sat down with the teachers and I said, this is what we're going through at home. Can you please get the social worker to pay close attention to these kids? Because I might be so lost in my own pain that I don't see some signs. So please, if there are any signs, just help me. That's what I need. I need help. And they paid close attention to my children. They did.
To raise a child.
It's very important for us, because sometimes you're so lost in your pain that you're not even aware of what is happening to your children. So get external help, because sometimes you cannot do it all by yourself. So those are just the 2 points I wanted to make.
Yes, Shirley.
And to add to that, I did that when I first went through my divorce, and I kind of did that now with my kids starting a new school. I just want to stick to the point that as women going through a divorce, it is highly important to get therapy. Whether you feel like it's 5 years down the road and you're strong, still continue that therapy. I still see my therapist, and she has been wonderful to me. Like, it is very necessary. And to touch on Dorothy's point, I never let my kids understand what my ex-husband and I are going through. We can be going back and forth in an email. As soon as my kids come to me, that perspective changes. My behavior changes. I don't carry that on and say, Daddy is doing this and Daddy is doing that. Because regardless of how I feel about him,
It's their
he's
father.
their dad. He's their dad. He will always remain their father. I cannot take that away. They bear his last name. But one thing that is so important for our sanity is to get therapy. I know that there's the stigmatism in our African community that therapy is when you're going crazy.
Mhm.
No, please
Mhm.
throw that stigmatism out the window.
Mhm.
You need therapy. Without therapy, I would not have been able to heal and become the woman I am today.
Wow. So good to hear. So good to hear. It's been a wonderful conversation, ladies. I cannot tell you how much I have learned from you, and see all of you glow. After all what you've gone through, you've been broken, you pick up the pieces, you rise up and you're excelling in your own disciplines. Thank you so much for sharing your stories. I believe that, like Dorothy said, if one person is impacted positively, then you've done your job. Thank you so much for coming back, Dorothy and Gladys. And hey, Shirley, I always tell my guests, it's not your last time. You'll be back
Okay.
on the show again. All right. Thank you so much. Appreciate
Thank you, Mabel. Thank you.
Thank
much.
you. Thanks
you.
for having
Thanks,
us.
It
ladies.
was a pleasure being here.
Dorothy.
Talk to me, Africa. Talk to me, Africa. Talk to me, Africa.